Inside my 99 Plymouth Voyager, and we're going to look at how to replace this, the ignition cylinder. Now it's working great, but it got stuck. And first off, here's how to get it unstuck if it's stuck. If this only happened to you a few times, no big deal. All you need is to carry something with you, and I grab whatever's handy, whether it's a plastic coffee cup or in this case one of my kids' combination locks for when we go to the pool. And if it won't turn, just do this. Just tap on it. When it first started, all I had to do was tap with my knuckles and it would be fine. But you are going to have to turn it a little bit at least to get the cylinder out ultimately. The next step we're going to do is, if we look underneath the steering column here, there are holes here that have Phillips head screws inside of them, and those need to be taken out, and then we'll be able to take off this half of this plastic cover. And so here comes the last of the screws, and that's what the screws look like from the bottom of that plastic piece. And now all I do is grab a hold of this, and don't be afraid. And don't be afraid to get a little brutal with it. Now the whole cover will come off. And now we can see all the nifty guts under here. Isn't that cool? Importantly, this is the whole area where your ignition cylinder is. Yeah, I didn't take off my negative battery cable. That's apparently a good idea, but I've never had a problem. Knock on wood. I'm going to go ahead and take off this top cover too, just so it's not rattling around. There's a plastic piece here, and the best thing I've found to do with this thing to get it out of the way while you're working on it is to move it, get the key in there. The plastic may get brittle with age. This one's from 99 though, so it's quite a few years old, and it's still flexible enough. Alright, now I got my key in there, and I'm going to turn it. Now it's stuck. So let me do what I do. Here's my... That's why we're doing this. Camera running here, maybe on the floor. Looking straight up at it, hopefully, because this plastic piece is keeping me from being able to really get it jiggling. Oh, now you're really stuck. This is why you want to do this now, by the way, because you can imagine what would happen if I couldn't get this to move. I wouldn't be able to get the cylinder out if I couldn't get the ignition to move at all. Alright, let me bring the camera back up here and show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to put this on so it can run, and that'll let me take this out of park. I'm going to take it all the way down to low, and then I'm going to drape that piece of plastic over the knob and put it back up into park. And that gets this plastic piece well out of my way, so now I can work on this without having any problems. Alright, so we can see the ignition nice. The place you want to be, when you see it face to face, you'll have a better idea, but there's a little thing to push up on right here. I just put my screwdriver into it. That's the release to let the ignition cylinder slide right out. So there's my ignition cylinder. Here's my removed entire ignition cylinder. The actual cylinder is inside of here, and it rotates inside of this housing. If I can one-handedly do this, make it rotate a little bit. There you go. So, and you'll notice that there are pins here, like that pin just seated, so that's one of the seat points for this thing. For example, when you put it on accessory or whatever. I'm going to take it all the way to that end, and you can see that there's a stop point. That pin is not going to be able to roll past that. What I have to do next, and I'll use my little multiplier here, I'll get a little screwdriver, and I'm going to grab this pin or get under it, and push it down so that it allows me to go past this stop point. Once I let the cylinder go past that stopping point, this should slide right out. So picking back up right after I got it over that hump, you see the pin in the last little bit of video, the pin was in this location here in that little notch, and now the pin is just on the other side of that. And obviously when it's in the car, it's never going to do that because you have to push down on that pin to get it to do this. Now I should be able to just rotate it until, ooh, look at that. Now my cylinder slides out, and I'm going to let the housing fall, and we'll look at the cylinder. This is the cylinder, and of course the key is inside of it, but look what happens when I draw the key out a little bit. You can see there are little brass pins basically that slide as the key goes in and the key comes out. Be careful, because once you take the key out, these things will not only slide, they're held in place partly by the housing, so they can actually slide right out. The trick to do next is to figure out which of these stinking brass pins is sticking and preventing you from being able to turn your key. And your options, you have two options at this point. You can go ahead and buy a whole new cylinder. You can do that. You can find them on auto stores, and they will let you program them to go with the key you already have. So that's the way to do it if you want to keep security high and you want to just have an ignition that works all the time. The other option is to figure out which of these stinking pins is getting stuck and preventing you from being able to turn it, and then just remove those pins that are causing the problem. If you can't find those pins and you're not worried about somebody stealing your vehicle, then you can just remove all of these little brass pins, and your ignition will turn without a problem. But the problem there is it'll turn no matter how the key is cut. You could actually turn it with an uncut key. So those are your options. What I'm going to do is figure out which of these pins is giving me the problem, and I'm just going to remove that pin or those pins. Okay, so I've got the pins the way I want them. I've removed the ones that were causing me a problem, and if you put the key back in the cylinder, it'll make it so that the grooves line up so that you can, well, it'll help. And basically just play with it until you get the cylinder back in to the housing, and then you should just have to push a little bit. There we go. And pop. And now we're back in. Right now it's on accessory. But all I got to do is get it back in the core. One thing, I experimented with taking all of the pins out, and one thing you should know, if you take all of the pins out, it doesn't matter what position the cylinder is in, you'll be able to remove the key. So if your car is running, you can take your key out. But of course, if the pins are all gone, you'll never have a problem with the ignition cylinder getting stuck again. So there's ups and downs to that. Okay, that's all I wanted to show you was that, oh, I guess we could put it back together, couldn't we? Pointing. That is the little thing we had to push on to get the cylinder out. And what I'll have to do is position this. I'm gonna have to position the cylinder inside of its housing so that we can slip it back in. I need two hands to do that. Let me try and do this. Let's see if this works. Basically, that's accessory. This is in the normal stop and pull the key out position. And somewhere in this neighborhood, if you push on this, you'll find, there it is. See, it went in. So that's the position it needs to be in when I slide it back in. So I'll hold it right there for now and get ready to slide it back in. Get under here. And you heard it pop. I'm not sure if you were pointing at it right, but you heard it pop. Now we're ready to go. Yep. Just making sure it's in there correctly and I can do everything I need to do. And I'm ready to put everything back together. I'll go ahead and show that if I can while I'm here. So we're ready to put things back together. First thing is this plastic cover here that we moved up with the shifter handle. You got to move that back down. So I'm going to put this into the run position, get this out of drive, get the plastic piece back over the shifter thing, put the key back. Into a position where I can pull it out, and then push that plastic piece back under this little bit of plastic housing. And what I've noticed is this always ends up being a little bit more bent after being in that position for so long. But the covers that go over the when we replace these plastic covers, that helps to put them back into position. This one's the bottom one. I know because it doesn't have a hole. My top one has that little hole in there for my emergency light, so I'll put this back on. Fits over that nice little light, and it's going to feel a little bit floppy at this point, and that's fine because they don't really tighten up until you get them both together. I'm going to grab my bottom one and I'll let my key on. Here's the interesting thing about removing. Put that back in park. Turn this back to accessory. The interesting thing about what I've done, which is removing all the pins, now it doesn't matter what position this key, my ignition is in. That key's gonna. I can take the key out whenever I want to. Yeah, there's good and bad to that, I suppose. Totally up to you. But I noticed, by the way, when I was taking apart the cylinder, and taking those brass pins out, the brass pins come out kind of difficult, so you have to play with them and jiggle them around to get them out. And I noticed the ones that were closer to this hole, they were all gunked up and nasty. Those might have been the ones that were sticking for me, because they were so gunked up they didn't move well. The springs wouldn't be able to put them in the right positions, so that might be the problem. Maybe take out just the first few of those brass pins and see if you're good, or of course just replace the entire cylinder, go buy a new cylinder and reprogram it and such. Anyway, back to the covers. Here's the bottom one again, and all I'm going to do is line these up, and I'm going to do as much as I can one-handed with you. You can see there's a tab that fits into a slot there, and basically I need two hands for this, but all you got to do is get it in there and then grab a hold. Actually, maybe I can do it. Yeah, see, it just snaps together just like a plastic model or something. And then I'll do that on the other side, and once they're snapped together, the screws that go in these holes will be nicely lined up with where they need to screw into. This plastic piece that was still kind of bent from being up on the shifter, it stays a bit bent, but after a few months, by the way, the plastic has a bit of memory and it comes back into shape, and this cover holds it down in the meantime. Anyway, alright, I'm going to go to putting my screws back in, put it all back together, but that's about it. That's how you remove, possibly repair, and cause maybe security issues with your ignition if you want to, or just replace your ignition cylinder. As always, if there's any questions, feel free to post them. Thanks for watching.